Hello and welcome to Bloody Good. My name is Montgomery and I've been a fan of horror my whole life.
My name's Emily and I'm a little newer to the genre.
Now, with Five Nights at Freddy's 2 coming out this week, me and Emily decided to re-watch the first movie and play the video game back to back. And when doing so, we realised something.
The film wasn't that accurate to the game itself. Sure, you had phenomenal performances, amazing practical animatronics, the legendary pizzeria, and of course, MatPat. But we couldn't help but just feel like it wasn't really that accurate to the game.
Now, while the Five Nights at Freddy's movie came out in just 2023, the game first came out on Steam back in 2015.
Now, between 2015 and 2023, there were actually two other movies featuring children's animatronics going on murderous rampages. Who knew? So we thought what would be best is to compare all three and decide which is closest to the game.
We will go through each movie looking at the plot, the scares, the characters, and the overall vibe just to compare how close it is to the game itself.
Now for some context and to establish kind of our baseline of what we're comparing these films to, it's the original Five Nights at Freddy's game.
Five Nights at Freddy's has you, the player, taking the role of a security guard who, after seeing a help wanted ad in the newspaper, gets a job working night security at a still open Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. You are guided by a mysterious voice on the phone who claims to be the previous night's security guard. So now that we know what we're comparing to, let's start with what should be our most accurate film.
The Five Nights at Freddy's film was in production for over 8 years, starting in April of 2015 and going through over 10 scripts. Original plans for the film ranged from having Markiplier in the lead role to Freddy being sold to a pawn shop, or the animatronics taking over Manhattan, Jason style. The film follows a down-on-his-luck security guard called Mike, who, after fumbling his last job, takes the job to be night security guard at Freddy Fazbear's. However, unlike in the game where the pizzeria is still operational, this Freddy Fazbear's has been closed since the 80s. The setting for this film is also different, with us seeing on the security camera that it's set in the year 2000, while the game is set in 1993, and we know this thanks to a paycheck and some maths done by a certain game theorist and lunch enthusiast.
Now, one of the biggest changes was the behaviour of the animatronics. In the game, we are told by Phone Guide that the animatronics view adult humans at night as uncostumed endoskeletons, and that they'll attempt to stuff you into a suit. Now, in the movie, they are still hostile towards adults and security guards. However, this seems to be more of a personal beef than a programming error. Although saying that, there are two separate occasions where they attempt to force an animatronic head onto a security guard. Once successful, once unsuccessful. Now, overall, we didn't find the movie that scary. Now, there are some jump scares and a couple moments of tension, but nothing close to what the game delivers.
There was also just a general lack of tension through the film. Now, the game is really tense because you're having to check cameras and check lights and check doors, all while conserving your power, and just none of that is really prevalent in the film. Now, these animatronics are really accurate to the game. They look like they've literally just jumped out of your computer screen. When the gang are on stage, they are actually animatronics, but when they're wandering around the pizzeria and interacting with our human characters, they're people in suits, and I think it just goes to credit how incredible the performers in the suits are, as well as everyone behind the scenes, because I think it's seamless. I would happily believe that they were animatronics the whole time. I think a big issue with this film is that we spend far too much time outside of the pizzeria. And I get the argument, we need to know a little bit about our protagonist to understand why he's in this position, but I just think we spent too much time with Mike outside of the pizzeria. Like I said before, I think we should have had way more time sat with him, watching the cameras, looking out for things. You know, he's got issues with sleeping, he's falling asleep on the job. If he'd have just been watching the cameras and he sees something in the corner and it's just playing on his mind throughout, I think it would have made it a way more interesting film.
I would have loved to see the creatures hunting down people a bit more. By the opening scene and the group of vagabonds that break in, we actually don't see the creatures being that scary, and I would have loved to see a little bit more of that. Now, here's an interesting one according to internet rumors. What if you made a Five Nights at Freddy's script that didn't get picked up, but instead of scrapping it, you took a dormant children's franchise and sort of shoved them in there, making your very own horror film about killer animatronics?
And that's exactly what they did with the Banana Splits movie. The Banana Splits was a real children's property from the 1960s with their own show and toys that kind of fell to the wayside as time went on.
Now, the Banana Splits film follows a family going to a live taping of the show, The Banana Splits. However, before the show begins, the animatronics are updated, and a bug in their system turns these once cuddly creatures into bloodthirsty maniac killer robots, with a whimsical twist.
The animatronics in this don't have the same creep or scare factor as the Fazbear 4. They just kind of look like Disney mascots, and the designs are kind of cute and cool, but they're not exactly scary. They lean a little bit too hard into the child-friendly territory, and even after one gets battle damage, it still feels like you're being followed around by a Disney mascot, and it's just not scary.
Now, the film tends to lean more into shock value, specifically on its kills, which are gruesome, bloody, and creative. It really leans a lot more into that body horror aspect that is sort of hinted at early on in the games.
The animatronics in this are shockingly bad. When we started watching the film, I turned to Monty and I said, "Why are we watching this film? It's got nothing to do with animatronics. Those are people in suits." And I was shocked to find out that they were actually trying to pass those people off as animatronics.
The animatronics referred to as banana splits feature Fleagle, Bingo, Drooper, and Snorky, with a human co-host Stevie who no one really likes. The film tends to pick and choose moments when the animatronics move in a robotic manner, accompanied with servo noises, while in the very next scene they will be moving about like a furry on MDMA. This is definitely one of the weakest aspects of the movie, especially since the director chose to hire dancers to better focus on the characters' movements. With the director Danishka Esterhazy saying, "I hired dancers to play the part of Fleagle, Bingo, Drooper, and Snorky, because I knew that they would be able to embody both the comic movements and the animatronic movements of their characters."
The animatronics also don't have particularly distinct personalities, and they just kind of all blend into one, except for maybe Snorky, who kind of is nice but also not, but otherwise they all just kind of blend together.
Now, the human characters are serviceable but mostly forgettable, with the notable exception of the father/stepfather in the film, who is the biggest asshole I've ever seen in a horror film, and I love him. He's just unapologetically the worst person in the universe, and it's great.
The vibe of this film just doesn't feel very close to Five Nights at Freddy's to us, and we find it bizarre that it was allegedly originally a Five Nights at Freddy's script that was changed. Obviously, a big change is that it's not in a pizzeria, it's in a TV studio, but overall it just lacks the tension that the game provides, because as they're hunting the people down, they don't feel particularly formidable.
Now, Willy's Wonderland is an incredibly interesting case, as it feels so close to Five Nights at Freddy's on paper that it borders on copyright infringement. However, Willy's Wonderland started life as a short film called Wally's Wonderland, released in 2016. Now, both the writer and director of the short and feature film have vehemently denied any correlation between their film and the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, claiming the idea came about in 2015, the same year the video game was released. The short film gained a large amount of attention and was picked up by major producers. Production began in February of 2020, and with a name change due to copyright issues, was released as Willy's Wonderland.
The Willy's Wonderland plot feels incredibly similar. It's a pizzeria with animatronics that are on stage and they play music and they interact with children for parties. Willy's Wonderland was owned and run by not just one serial killer, but multiple. They used the costumes to lure their victims to isolated locations before killing them. After their devious crimes were discovered by the police, the killers offed themselves before the police arrived, performing a satanic ritual where they transferred their souls into the animatronics.
Nicolas Cage is in this movie, by the way, playing the janitor, a completely silent protagonist with an addiction to soft drinks and a passion for pinball. And after being served up as another sacrifice, he only has two things on his mind: cleaning the pizzeria the best he can and killing any animatronics that stop him doing so.
While the film isn't really scary, it's definitely got the creep factor, and I think it's definitely the most creepy of the three films we're talking about. And I think it comes down to the eyes on the animatronics. They're very much like Furbies, and those always freaked me out as a kid, so I think that's something subconscious for me.
The film delivers on the tension, having Nicolas Cage's character being locked in the pizzeria, knowing there is no escape for him or the animatronics. The film is similar to Banana Split, with a big focus and emphasis on the gore of the kills, with this film really taking up a notch, showing just how gruesome you can kill a robotic animatronic. And it is just amazing to see.
The film features 8 different animatronics. These are Siren Sarah, Tito Turtle, Artie Alligator, Cammy Chameleon, Nighty Night, Gus Gorilla, Ozzy Ostrich, and of course their leader, Willy the Weasel. And I love the animatronics in this. I also just love the diversity in all their looks, especially something different like Gus and Ozzy. They are just completely different. They don't look like just a person in a suit. And I think Siren Sarah is kind of the exception there, because she is very clearly just a person in a suit with a mascot head on. but the way she moves is really creepy and choreographed so well that you can kind of look past it because she's cool enough anyway.
As for our human characters, we have, of course, the janitor, a badass who not only has no name we know of, but also doesn't say a word for the whole movie. This surprisingly works, coupled with his sort of odd quirks and mannerisms. It makes it quite believable this is the kind of man who sees a killer animatronic and doesn't just immediately run, which is what you should do, by the way. The film does feature some more characters who come into the fold later, with a group of teens who grew up in the small town and decide enough is enough as they plan to burn down the pizzeria, which is actually a really good idea and makes you wonder why that wasn't the first plan the adults of the town decided to do. The teens are actually surprisingly enjoyable to watch. Whilst all being fairly moronic and idiotic, they all have very unique personalities which make them really fun to watch.
I think this film feels the closest to the game for a number of reasons. Not only does it feature a silent protagonist like the games, but it's also set in a pizzeria where he's working overnight as he's hunted down by musically inclined killer animatronics. It feels textbook and shockingly similar to the games.
Overall, to us, this feels much closer to Five Nights at Freddy's the game than Five Nights at Freddy's the movie does. It is a struggle to survive and each animatronic's personality really shines through, as well as the majority of the story taking place in the pizzeria location helps sell the sense of isolation, claustrophobic tension, and the dreading fear of being trapped. But hey, that's just our opinion, and like Bottles, everyone's got one, so show us yours. Opinions, that is, in the comments.
Thank you so much for watching. We feel really incredibly lucky at all the attention this channel has gotten recently, and we truly take the time to read every one of your comments that you leave, so if you've taken the time to do so, thank you so much.
Additionally, if you like this video and are interested in how adaptations can change along the way during production, Emily has her very own series where she covers just that, called From Page to Screen, so check that out. Anyways, that has been the video, so thank you so much for watching, and good morning, good evening, and good night.